So, Daniel, we've got to get Daniel Goldman in here. You've been shaking your head a few times. Why can't we just stop right now and start a FBI investigation if the Republicans call for it?
There's no reason.
Okay.
And I think there are a couple problems here. First of all, the Senate committee staffers are not trained professional investigators. Two, the letter from Mark Judge is pretty meaningless because what you would really need to do to properly interview him is get into a lot of the details of what was going on. Look at that July 1st entry in the calendar of Brett Kavanaugh. You could easily figure out what house that was at. Then you could figure out whether the description matches what Professor Ford talks about. There are many ways to find corroboration or not corroboration if you want. And so we're left with a situation where, because of the delays, as Joe pointed out, with the Democrats and how they may have handled this, the Carrie Severino and others seem to be saying that it doesn't matter anymore.
What's out of the bottle that can't be put back in?
So that's exactly the question.
And
I think it's really important to understand that the Senate committee investigation is not the same as an FBI investigation. That's not what they're meant to do. And we know that in part because the Senate Judiciary Committee reopens background investigations all the time for this exact reason.
And let's just stop pretending that this isn't about keeping Mark Judge away from FBI agents. Everybody watching knows it.
It doesn't.
The conservatives who are saying just jam this through, it's gone on long enough. They know it. They could do. You could start them working today. They could be done by Monday. There's a small group of people that they can go to, and the Republicans and the White House and Chuck Grassley don't want that to happen. John Meacham, so we have a new horror movie that's going to be coming out this summer, Revenge of the Clintons. When Judge Kavanaugh spoke of the Revenge of the Clintons, my mind immediately went back to Hillary Clinton on the Today Show talking about the vast right-wing conspiracy. It's history rhymes.
It sure does, and that was among the most revealing things said yesterday. It clearly cast a bright light on the narrative that's the movie, if you will, that's playing in the heads of the nominee and his supporters. The idea is that they are trying to take out someone who was critical in the Starr investigation. To me, it's the most interesting parallel. We've all been talking, for understandable reasons, about the 27-year cycle from Judge Thomas and the 41 administration. This is much more about 1998 than it is 1991, I think, in terms of raw political power. And the fact that in his defiant statement yesterday, Judge Kavanaugh went straight for pulling out the battles of the 1990s is really interesting. Remember, one of the things that was so compelling to a lot of people about Barack Obama was that he wanted, as he put it, he was not going to relitigate the 60s. Remember, back in 2008. And part of his appeal against Senator Clinton at the time was, haven't we had enough of this? Haven't we had enough of the culture wars, of the wars of impeachment? Can't we, let's at least try to change the story. To me, what's so fascinating is we're right back there. As Faulkner said, the past is never dead, it isn't even past. And Kavanaugh, I think, was shaped in that cauldron. And I think the other thing, just quickly, we're not talking about, people aren't talking about changing 30 senators' minds either way. But you showed the graphic a minute ago of those 8, I guess. If I were one of those senators today, and this is not a partisan point, I would just be wondering, would I, knowing that if this conversation were unfolding in February of this year, in February of 18, as opposed to September of 18, that those senators would wait for more process, more of a chance to make sure this is, in fact, that this did not happen, or however the Kavanaugh people are framing it. They would by time to know more. And because it's September, and because of the midterms, basically those senators who have a chance to really make a mark here have decided that somehow or another they're going to throw reason out because Mitch McConnell might be mean to them.
Yeah.
I understand the politics of propping. I understand the human drama. I'm not there, but I'll tell you this: historically, as John Kennedy once said, there's a reason Profiles in Courage was just one volume. But they've got a chance to write a new chapter here, and they should.
Well, you talk about the portrait test. This is a portrait test. Let's put the faces up again. The vote, especially for Susan Collins, for Lisa Murkowski, for Jeff Flake, especially for those three, it is a career-defining vote for them, and a vote that, if they vote yes, could blow up in their faces oh my God, in January, if Democrats get the subpoena power and start investigating Judge Kavanaugh's background. And a lot of people are going to be turning to them and saying, why didn't you just wait 1 week?
Yep.
I mean, that's a hell of a portrait, isn't it, John?
It is, and the intellectual dishonesty and the inconsistencies are part of politics. I understand that, but the reason we have a United States Senate is, as Washington said, to cool the coffee in the saucer. And there are 8 people you just showed, I think, who have the capacity to say, we're just going to cool the coffee. Because this isn't the Secretary of Commerce, with all respect to the office of Herbert Hoover. It's 40 years plus of someone who's going to be a key voice in deciding how Americans live, what American rights and responsibilities are. And I don't know what happened in 1982, but I do think you have to now step back and say, if in fact there's more information to be had that might be corroborating of Dr. Ford's testimony, possibly, then you have someone who perjured themselves repeatedly in the pursuit of power. And so if there were any means necessary to clear that up, if there are any means available, and there are, including, final point, the ABA, which was approvingly quoted yesterday, Kavanaugh approvingly quoted their approving words about him, they just called to hit the brakes a little bit. So why won't why can't those senators say, you know what, let's just wait?
Yep. I think that's actually where this story is at this point. That's the cliff it's on. John Meacham, thank you very much. Daniel Goldman, thank you as well. And still ahead, we were supposed to learn the fate of Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein yesterday, but his meeting with the president was put on the back burner thanks to yesterday's hearing. We'll figure out where everything stands there. Plus, NBC's Richard Engel has been following the foreign money tied to Donald Trump's 2016 campaign for a long time, and he has new reporting on a major campaign donor with ties to Russia. Morning Joe will be right back.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.